Hello again, everyone. It's Kevin Adkisson, curator of the Cranbrook Center for Collections and Research, coming to you live at 5 from Saarinen House. And today I thought that we would celebrate the birthdays of Eliel and Eero Saarinen, which are tomorrow, August 20th, by looking at some of the designs by Eliel and Eero for use at the table here at Saarinen House. Now, we've done a few Live at Fives from Saarinen House. I've talked about the house and its visitors. I've talked about Studio Loya Saarinen and the weaving for Saarinen House. And today, I wanted to talk all about how they entertained and what they used to entertain. So the living room is this long room that is divided from the dining room just using these portieres or curtains. And the story goes that when they were entertaining, they would keep the curtains closed and then dramatically open them to reveal this golden dining room. And one of Eliel's principles of design was that the architect was responsible for every element. His son would take it to mean that the architect should design everything except for nature itself. For Eliel Saarinen, he said that the architect started with the design of the individual building and then worked out towards the street and then the city plan, and then worked in towards designing the interior design, designing the furniture, the rugs, and then, of course, designing everything that went on the table. And so here at Cranbrook, Eliel Saarinen was given the chance to design it as a total work of art. And with Saarinen House, he was really given a chance because he had at his command a fine silver shop and a blacksmith forge. He had pottery studios. He could design wares and then they could be made and he could use them here in his house. And so he designed everything from the teacup to the table to the room to the entire city plan. Now, I have chosen for our study today some of my favorite objects, but remarkably, even with as full as the table looks now, there's actually another dozen pieces that I could have pulled if we wanted to have a 2-hour-long Live at 5, which I know would be fine for most of us. But a lot of that work is stored at Cranbrook Art Museum, and so I didn't want to move fine pieces of silver over to Saarinen House today. So we're going with what is usually kept on display in the cabinets here at Saarinen House. And I want to start with this silver tea urn, which was designed around 1934. It is a real icon of sort of the Art Deco machine age aesthetic. It really looks like, almost like a bright and shiny droid from Star Wars. It looks sort of like a Hollywood lunar rover. It really looks like it could sort of take flight. One lesson that I learned in studying decorative arts back at Yale in the Yale University Art Gallery was whenever you're studying a chair or anything designed by an architect, you should always look at it in direct straight on, as if you're looking at it in elevation, and then you should study it in plan, as if you're looking straight down, because those are the sort of drawing conventions of the architect, which is quite different from a silversmith who is only working in silver. The architect is used to designing a building, and so they tend to design their functional objects and furniture like a building. And I think that is true even for Eliel Saarinen, who actually hated designing in plan section and elevation. He thought the architect should design in models and in perspective. It is true that his decorative arts really have this severity to them and this sort of purity when you look at them straight on. They are like tiny works of architecture, and there are certain elements like the tea spout here, that recall many designs at Cranbrook, whether the little check mark that you see over at the baldachin at the School for Boys with the iron cupola, the Nichols Gate at the end of the Triton Pools, or even the door of the Art Museum has this same little check mark. And so it's a motif that he repeats through all different material types and all different scales for his design here at Cranbrook. Now, I mentioned this is around 1934. This was not made at Cranbrook. At that point, we did not have a fine silver shop. It had closed because of the Great Depression. And so this was made by the International Silver Company, the Wilcox division of International Silver, which is a Connecticut-based conglomerate of silver manufacturers, probably the most preeminent American silver factory or output of the 20th century. And they actually produced this silver plate urn tea service for commercial production. So you could actually buy this entire set for $80. I think back and wish my great-grandparents had bought one. It was not a popular seller, so it's unclear how many there are, but there's not a lot. It was $80 for the tea urn and $30 for the tea tray. It is silver plate, and it has a built-in burner. And this is actually the Kingswood model, which is a one-off produced by International Silver. Cranbrook doesn't have any of the ones that were manufactured for retail. We have 3 one-offs. The Academy of Arts example, which has no sort of heat break. So if you're at the Academy and getting tea, and you grab this, you would burn yourself. This is a little bit later. The Kingswood model has ebony, and then the model for Cranbrook School for Boys has Bakelite as a heat stop, and that's how we keep the 3 of them apart. When it was in use, you would turn the spout to serve the tea, and it was notorious for leaking tea, and so it was actually at Kingswood, one of the young ladies' duties was to sit with a teacup constantly under the tea urn, catching the drips as the tea moved along. Now, accompanying this set is a creamer and a sugar. This is designed either by Aliel or Arrow. There's a compelling reason to attribute it to father and son, but it's unclear who designed them. They're obviously designed in conjunction with the tea urn, but they're part of a number of different creamer and sugars that went with each urn, including there is one sugar that has the same type of lid that was made by Harry Bertoia. It's over at the Art Museum at the moment. These were made in Finland and Helsinki by the silver workshop of Taidetakamo in 1935. And these are actually spun nickel silver. And interestingly, it does sort of catch in the light the difference between nickel silver or German silver or Chinese pak tong and silver plate is that this has silver in it. Nickel silver, which we see here, is an alloy made of copper, nickel, and zinc. It's an ancient Chinese alloy. It became popular in Germany in the 19th century and then became more widely used in the 20th century as a non-tarnishing alternative to fine silver. So there's no actual silver in this piece. And if we look at the bottom, we do see the maker's mark of made in Finland. Again, to the design of Aliel and or Arrow. Next, we move on to a dinner service that I know the Saarinens use because I do have a picture down here of Loya Saarinen standing with her Chemex coffee maker, and she has her placemats, the black plates, and then the coffee service, that wonderful bonbon tray, designed, of course, by Aliel Saarinen. Starting with the plates, these black plates were the Saarinens' everyday wear, and they had them in all different sizes. They're made in Gefle, Sweden, and they're still in use by the Saarinen family. So thank you, Bob Swanson, for loaning me that black plate. Underneath it is one of the treasures of Cranbrook, this placemat. This placemat was designed, executed, and produced by Eero Saarinen. It's on a linen weave. And Arrow designed this placemat. He designed this pattern and he carved it in a wood block. And then he would have taken the carved wood block, dipped it into ink, and then pressed it onto the linen fabric. And so it is a wood block print of Arrow's own design and with Arrow's own carving skills. He did this around 1920 at the house in Finland. He was 10 years old when he made this, which is kind of amazing. You can see that it has this almost read like Egyptian hieroglyphs with all of these figures in profile, different sort of scenes. You can see someone hammering away at something there. Is that perhaps a little blacksmith with an andiron? So you see the incorporation of art and craft in the placemat. You see the hikers here. It's a pretty wonderful object to have in the collection. Now, alongside the placemat are the commercially produced versions of the Candide Silverware. Now, this was designed for Saarinen House. In silver, it's called the Contempora pattern, and it was made by Reed & Barton, which is a company, a silver manufacturer in Taunton, Massachusetts. Reed & Barton was around from 1824 until 2015 when it was went bankrupt and was bought out by Lennox. So you can see the Reed & Barton mark there on the back. Now these are silver plate over stainless steel, but the Saarinens were using true silver. Their complete set is at Cranbrook Art Museum. This is a different set of the more affordable production model, so stainless steel and silver plate instead of solid silver. And you see the sort of tapering decoration, the way that it has this sort of telescoping form. And if we look at that telescoping detail there, and then we back up a bit, we see that same pattern on the rug in the red. We see the peacocks are sitting on telescoping forms. The front of the house has a telescoping form. And so you see the way that these design motifs pick up and repeat. Now, the glassware here, the decanter and cordial glasses, as well as the champagne glass, the wine glass, the water glass, and a number that are still in the cabinets. We'll look at the pantry in a moment. These are all by the Orrefors Company, which is a Swedish glass company, founded in 1898 and went under in 2012. Orrefors is known for its mid-century modern art glass that was competing against French houses like Lalique. But they started out doing commercial window glass and bottle glass for industry. But around the 1920s, they got more into doing servingware and functional glasses. This pattern is from 1939, and we know that the Saarinens used all of this material here in the house. I do think it's interesting. Most of the service is this 1939 pattern, including these wonderful, bonbon dishes, which are done with diamond cut glass. So you see that the piece was blown and you blew this sort of shallow glass bowl, and then using a glass cutter, a diamond circular drill, the craftsman would have moved this scallop edge around the drill plate. And so what you're seeing is this sort of piece of glass taken against the rotating blade, and then it carves it into this wonderful lip. And like any sort of cut glass, if it's true cut glass and not pressed glass, even through my glove, this is a very sharp edge. So if you're ever at the antique store or an estate sale and you're trying to decide, is this true Czechoslovakian cut glass or is this American pressed glass? Feel that edge. And if it's sharp enough to give you a paper cut, it's truly cut glass. What's interesting, I don't know if they needed more pieces or if they broke some of these very beautiful but still made of glass pieces. There are a limited number of a later post-war Aurifors pattern, which has this more linear, sharp-edged design. It's still the same amber color that coordinated with the black plates and the golden placemats and would have coordinated with the coral table cloth that was the same material as used on the chairs. This sort of patterning of gold, coral, and dark black. And they also picked out a number of plates to use in the house. Now, this is the salad plate of the whole dinner pattern. It has these beautiful painted rings, and the glaze, it's underpainted decoration, and it has this really beautiful crazing in the center, and then the red or burgundy line, and then this pale green line behind it. And this is English ceramics from the Susie Cooper line. And she has this fabulous Art Deco sort of logo. Susie Cooper was an English potter. She set out on her own in October of 1929 after working for the A.E. Cray Company. She was in Stoke-on-Trent, which is the world's manufacturer of dinnerware. I was able to travel to Stoke-on-Trent in graduate school with the Winterthur program, and they challenged us while we were there to, whenever you're out eating at a restaurant, flip over your plate and see if it was made in Stoke-on-Trent. It's where Wedgwood and Spode and all of the great English ceramic houses are located. Susie Cooper was a potter. She was from the area. She began doing painted decoration, and she rose up through the ranks of the Cray Company. She set off on her own, which is unique, that she would be a female-led entrepreneur, and she turned it into really quite an enterprise, and they were producing wares all the way through the 1980s when she retired. This is a piece that, based on the Maker's Mark, was launched into production sometime between 1932 and 1938, and the Saarinens have a whole set of the Susie Cooper. Now, moving on to our next objects, you may recognize these pieces. The cocktail shaker is the Gaiety Cocktail Shaker by Howard Reichenbach, and it's made out of spun and chrome-plated brass. Very beautiful Art Deco piece from 1933, went into manufacture in 1934, a sort of icon of the Art Deco style. And it is accompanied by a Czechoslovakian seltzer named the Old Faithful Seltzer. And the seltzer is actually made out of metal wire wrapped around the glass. And you can see that it actually says Old Faithful on the little charger here. And these were the Saarinens cocktail shakers. They probably didn't use them here in the dining room. They probably used them on the bar cart, which is back in the studio. And in front of these two pieces from 1933 and 1921, we see a set of glasses from 1946. And these are designed by Pipson Saarinen Swanson, Eero's older sister. She was 5 years older than Eero. She was a designer in her own right of textiles and furniture, dresses and fashions, interiors, but also tablewares. And starting in 1947, she and her husband, J. Robert F. Swanson, launched the Saarinen Swanson Group of Decorative Objects, which was a line of affordable and well-designed home goods. These glasses were made by the U.S. Glass Company of Tiffin, Ohio. Ohio, the great center of American glassmaking. And we see here just one of the most beautiful objects at Cranbrook, I think, the champagne flute, and then the wine glass next to it, and the water goblet behind. There was also a sherbet bowl in the same series. And these are, again, made of blown glass vessels and then cut glass bases. And so these pieces that look almost like blocks of ice are again quite sharp to the touch. Also from the Saarinen Swanson line and used in the last years of the house and then used by Loya at her own house is this set of dishes, which are from about 1947, again from the Saarinen Swanson group. And so these would have retailed at Hudson's downtown, at Macy's in New York, Wanamaker's in Philadelphia, Gump's in San Francisco. These were retailed all across the country, and they were marketed as affordable good design. These plates are interestingly designed by Lydia Winton Malbin. And Lydia Winston Malbin was the daughter of Albert and Ernestine Kahn. So Albert Kahn, the great industrial architect who built Cranbrook House in 1908, this was his daughter's design. She has a fascinating history. She studied at Vassar. She married Harry Winston in 1940 with Hilla Ribe, who was the founding curator of the Guggenheim Museum. Lydia and Hilla launched Detroit's first show of abstract painting at the DIA in 1940. But after all of this work as an art collector and a curator, she came to Cranbrook and she graduated from Cranbrook with a degree in ceramics and painting in 1944. These are pieces that she designed for the Saarinen Swanson group. She had these manufactured at the Frankoma Pottery, which was founded by John Frank in Oklahoma, Frankoma, and it was in Norman, Oklahoma. He was a professor at University of Oklahoma, and these were part of the Saarinen Swanson group and this sort of circle that Pipson and Bob Swanson had manufacturing pieces for production. Now, Lydia Winston Malbin went on to become a major art collector and a major collector of art books, living in New York, and her archives are at Yale as well. Here's a photograph that I pulled showing some happy Cranbrook faculty members and family members here in the dining room. On the far right, we see head of painting and second Cranbrook president, Zoltan Zepeshi. Marianne Strangel standing, the second director of the weaving department after Loya Saarinen. Then Lily Swan, who came to study sculpture and married Eero Saarinen, seated at the tea urn, probably keeping it from dripping. And then Wallace Mitchell standing, the instructor in drawing and then head of painting, director of the art museum, and the fourth president of Cranbrook. So though they probably didn't know it when they took this picture, these two men would eventually move into Saarinen House. And on the table, we see the dishes from Cooper. We see the little sugar and creamer from Finland designed by Eliel and Eero. And of course, we see the tea urn. Now, just coming back to the tea urn, I mentioned that this is the Kingswood designed tea, or Kingswood specific tea urn. The Saarinens did have their own tea urn, but interestingly, theirs was brass plated. So this is silver plate here, giving it the silver finish. But the Saarinens had a brass plated version made for the house. Theirs was first from around 1933, and it was acquired by the Metropolitan Museum of Art. But it is interesting to think that they were using a brass tea urn, because if you look at this room with its brass light and its gold leaf ceiling, you can see why they wanted to have brass accessories. And that included this vase over here, which is another piece from International Silver in Connecticut, designed by Eliel Saarinen in 1935 and came into the house by 1936. And this is an example of the brass plate. I will say it needs to be polished, but we don't polish things when we're not having guests in the house. Polishing metal takes off little pieces of metal, and so you want to polish your silver items and any metal as little as possible. If it tarnishes, that actually protects the surface. So if you're not using it and you're not looking at it, let it tarnish. And that is a great way to preserve your silver items. So we haven't polished anything because we're not open for tours. So it's looking a little dusty over there. Now, there are a few other items in the dining room that if you came to Saarinen House for a meal, you would have been enjoying in these niches. Loya Saarinen did occasionally put flowers in the niches, but regularly she had on display pieces like this European tray that is made of German silver from the 19th century. They would also display this coffee and chocolate pot, again from the early 19th century. It is brass that has been tinned on the inside so that you don't poison yourself if you put a hot liquid in there. And then it has cast iron handles. And then in the last niche, we see a much earlier Eliel Saarinen designed coffee pot and stand. And this coffee pot and stand dates to about 1905 to 1910. So at Eliel Saarinen's time back at Vitrosk in Helsinki. And this coffee pot and stand is made out of spun and fabricated brass. And it is accompanied by two little sugar creamers, or creamer here and the sugar here, that are made out of spun brass with a wooden handle. And these are actually Dutch by Jan Eisenloffel. And they coordinate quite beautifully with the arts and crafts design of the coffee urn, or coffee pot and stand. Now, I mentioned the way that Saarinen would design for every scale. And he always designed so that pieces would coordinate between different scales, but they never are a direct copy. It's not like sort of postmodern decorative arts where you have Michael Graves designing a coffee service that's a little Michael Graves building, or all of the wonderful production from Swid Powell in the 80s where you have Robert A.M. Stern designing a pitcher that's just a little ionic column. First of all, Eliel Saarinen does not have irony within his design, but he's also using this, I think, very sophisticated manner of transforming elements from architecture to furniture to decorative objects. So if you look at the way that these chairs read almost like column capitals or column shafts, and you have this velvet here with this pattern, this linear pattern, the chair back, which is made of maple with painted decoration, and then you see the slotted base covering the heat source for the urn. And so you have these sort of three variations of vertical elements, or you have this little tea spout handle with that little check mark, and then we come over here to the peacock andirons, and what do you notice about what they're sitting on? That same little check mark design. It's incredibly sophisticated, incredibly elaborate, and just really wonderful the way that he incorporates certain motifs. Like, do you see here the chair back has made an appearance now on the lamp bases. Now, I want to step into the pantry. When Loya Saarinen would entertain here in the house, she did have a housekeeper who would make dinner, but Loya would make certain elements. Maybe she would make the dessert, a pineapple upside down cake. So you would have a plate, which, let's say that she's using her English set of dinnerware. You would have the round cake with the round piece of pineapple with a red cherry in the center with the red rim on a golden round table underneath a golden ceiling, and you get this sort of complete harmony between the dinner, the food for dinner, and the room that it's in. She would serve dinner through the butler's pantry. And now that I've opened the door, and make sure if you're new to Live at 5, I've done other tours where I talk more about the fur paneling and the design of the whole house. But when the door was open, you would see the refrigerator, this wonderful Frigidaire, which is powered by a motor in the basement, so it would be perfectly quiet as you sat for dinner. The kitchen is actually the next room over and is not on tour, but I love that the refrigerator lines up with the fireplace, so you have hot on one end of the room, cold on the other. They would use this butler's pantry to serve dinner from, so this was where the food would be plated and where meals would be prepared to be taken to the table. The countertops are Monel metal, which is yet another alloy, this time a 20th century copyrighted alloy. You often do see German silver countertops, but Monel was slightly softer, doesn't have nickel in it. Within the cabinets, and then I'll come back to those tempting plates, we see more of the dishes, the Cooper dishes, as well as the Saarinen Swanson dishes from Francoma, and then all of the mini glassware pieces from Orifors. I thought it would be fun just to bring out a few more of designs that we attribute to Eliel Saarinen, though I have spent the better part of a year attempting to decide or to research whether he designed these or not. These are the plates from the Cranbrook institutions. So first up, they are all Syracuse china, though you will occasionally find some that are not because they had to be ordered every few years. So there's a wide variety of years for these plates. This one, CS for Cranbrook School, 1926, which is a year before the school opened for classes, and 2 years before the dining room opened, but they all say 1926. And we do attribute this design to Eliel Saarinen. However, there's no record, there's no illustration of his designing it in the Syracuse archives or Cranbrook archives. So I'm looking for the smoking gun that says he designed these plates. Then there's the Kingswood school plate, which has this lovely deep coral, which coordinated with the lighter coral furniture. And for Cranbrook School, they had maybe 8 different dishes. For Kingswood School, you get upwards of 40 different dish types. Kingswood School also had its own line of silverware, and then Cranbrook School had its own little CS monogram silverware. The teacup that went with the tea urn. My favorite plate, which is the Cranbrook Academy of Art plate. You know that the Academy never had its own dining room. Sarnan did design a dining hall for the Academy of Art. It would have been exactly where the collections wing was built in 2011. The students who would have used this plate, they would have either used these at student teas. So we do have color video of Charles Eames holding one of these plates, eating a little scone. They would have also used them in the lower level of the architecture studio, where Lounge currently is located. There was a dining hall. And then there is the Institute of Science Dinner Service, which is another building that did have a dining room, the 3rd floor of the Institute. It has not for many, many years, but it has the CIS cipher here. And just the last 2 things that I thought I would show you, something from the Kevin Adkisson personal collection, is this Saarinen-inspired percolator. So this is actually an electric percolator, and the electric cord is inside. A gift from a friend's grandmother. Thank you for sending this to me, Harry. And this is late 1930s. I found an advertisement from 1939 that included this piece. It's from the Manning Bowman Company, but I think it just shows you sort of Saarinen's influence on design. Even though he did not design this, it's clearly inspired by the Cranbrook Tea Urn, transformed into an electric coffee percolator with a chrome-plated finish, a glass top, and then these are Bakelite Accessories. And since it is her birthday, I thought that I would point out, after we have our dinner, how are the Saarinens going to clean up? This is just a prop, but the Saarinens did have the same vacuum cleaner, the 1937 Electrolux, designed by Laurel Guild, who was an industrial designer, illustrator, author, collector, and it is her birthday today. So it's also Maya Grotel's birthday today, so happy birthday to all these Cranbrook characters. Happy birthday, Bob Swanson II, yesterday. Happy birthday, Eliel and Arrow, tomorrow. Happy birthday, anyone else who's watching, and it's your birthday. Or if I missed your birthday, happy birthday. And Mrs. Saarinen did like to keep her favorite beer, Detroit's own Goebbels beer, stacked up here in the pantry. I hope that you enjoyed this look at some of the tables fixtures designed by and used by the Saarinens here at Sarnan House and designed by the Saarinens for use around Cranbrook's campus. Now, there are other wonderful pieces of silver and servingware that were designed and used on Cranbrook's campus. And some of those I will be talking about next week on Tuesday at 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. when I deliver our second Uncovering Cranbrook lecture. This lecture is going to be about the Bauhaus in Cranbrook. The Bauhaus was the revolutionary German school of design and art, most famously led by Walter Gropius, who was here at Cranbrook in 1940, but Gropius moved the Bauhaus to Dessau, Germany, into buildings of his own design. And the lecture is going to be considering Cranbrook as an American Bauhaus. Is Cranbrook an American Bauhaus? I have my own thoughts about whether we were a Bauhaus at any point. Maybe we were later than the Saarinens era. Maybe we weren't. I don't know. But there are really amazing similarities between the two schools. The Bauhaus with its programs in painting and furniture and weaving and metalcraft, and the way that the Bauhaus thought that they could revolutionize society and revolutionize the life of the worker through design and through bringing industrial production into design. I think there's a real similarity to what the Bauhaus was doing in its collections of tea urns and coffee pots to what Cranbrook was doing in the 1930s, and the way that Saarinen conceived of architecture as being an art that encompassed every aspect of life and every aspect of the man-made world. I think that the Bauhausler were thinking along very similar lines. Of course, the Bauhaus closes in 1933 and Cranbrook Academy of Art opens officially in 1932. So come sign up for that lecture on the center.cranbrook.edu website. Tickets are $20. It's going to happen at 10 a.m. and at 7 p.m. next Tuesday. There's also a concert coming up at Cranbrook next Saturday, August 29th, if that's a Saturday. It's the Great Lakes Wind and String. We'll be doing a Michigan debut of a new piece called Sila, and the tickets for that are available through the Great Lakes Wind and Strings. It's going to be a socially distant concert, just 60 members of the audience. Each of you will have your own 20-foot cube over on the Cranbrook School's quadrangle. Tickets for that are $100 each, and that is being hosted by the Center for Collections and Research, but does support the musicians of the ensemble. I'll try and put a link to that on our Facebook if it's not already there. I don't think that event is on our website. So if you want to know more, do send a message or check out our Facebook. And I don't know if I have anything else to plug. We're always trying to think of new ways to bring the Cranbrook story of art, education, and science to you, our viewer. If you have questions about Cranbrook, don't hesitate to write in. If you have requests for locations, send me a message. I never know what I'm going to talk about until we start. So I'm always happy to bring my camera and my happy self to a new spot of campus and to teach you all more about this remarkable place. Thanks for watching. I hope that you have a wonderful dinner. I hope that none of you get any ideas about looking on eBay for these pieces, because I don't want to have to compete. Kidding, you will not find much Eliel Saarinen on eBay, but there are always beautiful things that you can find and bring into your own home, and you can celebrate the sort of Eliel Saarinen idea that if everything is beautiful, everything is designed, everything is coordinated, our lives will be more fulfilling and more beautiful. A great arts and crafts ethos that Cranbrook subscribed to in the 1900s and continues to believe in. Thanks so much for watching. Be safe, stay home, wear your mask, be sensible, and I will see you next week, Wednesday at 5 o'clock for another Live at 5 tour. Go encourage your 10-year-old to start doing some block printed placemats.